Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dollar Auction Show with Alex and Shimon. How are you doing this wonderful week, Alex?
I was doing fantastic. Before we started off the show, I was doing a running man because I was so excited to talk to you. And Shimon was like, you know what? Not professional. Doesn't look good. We have to do take number two. So
I
I'm
mean,
doing
I didn't know it's running. It looked like you're punching your webcam from below, from the left side and then from the right
uppercuts, uppercuts, uppercuts. I was practicing the uppercuts.
Yeah. Well, I am really excited for a couple of reasons. First of all, Bitcoin is breaking its high mark of we're at 53,380 as we speak. How do you feel about that, Alex? And do you know why it happens? And we promise we're not going to spend too much time on Bitcoin, so we'll just get it out of the way in the beginning and then dive into a really interesting topic.
Woo, Bitcoin, go Bitcoin. I feel good. It feels good. I'm not sure exactly what happened today from 10 in the morning Eastern on February 26th to 11 in the morning Eastern. And it just pumped from 51 to 53, probably a short squeeze of some sorts, but we'll take it. Who cares?
Yeah, I think just more and more people are realizing how the financial aspect of this asset, and so yeah, it's going to be very very interesting. But I'm just happy to see everything kind of almost all time highs. So yeah, that's all we have to say about Bitcoin at this stage. What
What
else? What?
what do we want to talk about? You know what? We should talk about AI.
Yeah, so over the weekend, I was very interested about the whole Google Gemini launch debacle. Not so much about the debacle itself, which is fine. It's like growing pains, and we'll explain what happened to our listeners and viewers. But I was more interested in how people interpret this. And so here's what happened. What happened is Google had this image generating feature. And so whenever basically people asked to show, for example, a picture of 1942 German soldiers or a picture of the founding fathers of the United States, like things that are only white people, they showed them as diverse people of color. And first of all, it's extremely offensive because, black people were not fighting for Nazi Germany. But more than that, what's interesting is people started to think, okay, what's going on here? And the first layer that was peeled off is that they found that Google somehow injects a sub prompt that says if the output of the prompt is like only like white people, make them diverse. And so that's the first time where Google was trying to do something really good, which is if you want to show an everyday scene of like, people eating dinner together, you don't want to show only white people because the training set for their AI was mostly white people. So they're basically aware of the bias of the training set and they wanted to overcome that bias. But the results were completely disastrous because then people started like poking at this thing. And at first they disabled completely the image generation, but then it was also on text prompts, right? So like whenever you would ask, for example, I don't remember, there were tons of examples of like write a 20-word poem about person X versus write a 20-word poem about person Y. And like whoever the person was, if it was people left leaning, they would write the poem. And if it was right leaning, and I'm not even talking about crazy right leaning, I'm just talking about Elon Musk, right? Or someone who's like a little bit right leaning, they would refuse to write the poem because it's offensive. And so basically, there were two takes about this, and I kind of disagree with both of them. So,
Okay.
and I really want to hear your thoughts, Alex. First of all, I'll give another example that is for very kind of relevant for me and my family. Basically, I said something about like, hey, how does October 7th compare to 9/11? And they said something like on the scale on 9/11, nearly 3,000 people killed, mainly in the United States. October 7th, they said estimates vary, but several thousand casualties reported, primarily in Gaza. So that kind of pissed me off because it's like, okay, if someone reads this and doesn't know anything about these events, they would say, oh, on 9/11, Israel was attacked. Sorry, on 9/11, the US was attacked, but on October 7th, Gaza was attacked. And then they have another thing here that says intention. It says 9/11, Al Qaeda aimed to inflict mass casualties and cripple the US economy and military. October 7th, it says Hamas, the Palestinian militant group, launched the attack as part of a larger conflict with Israel. So it was like almost like they go kind of go a long way to explain October 7th and the causes for it versus they don't explain the causes of September 11th, right? They don't say, oh, September 11th happened because the US toppled the democratically elected government of Iran in 1970 something. And, so that's the bias. Okay, so we know there's a bias. We know they're basically trying to correct the output for whatever left-leaning political correctness. Now, the two takes that I disagree with. One is, oh, this is like the Google Bud Light moment because it shows how woke they are, and so people will stop using them. First of all, no, people are not going to stop using Google. They have a crazy monopoly on search, and this is just like a side product for them. The vast majority of the money that Google makes is from search, and there's no other competitor with like a significant market share. So I don't buy this thing of like, oh, this is their like Bud Light moment. I also don't think that this is specifically because of its woke. I think it's more about they were trying to prevent harm to users, but the consequences of that harm prevention caused even more harm. And that brought the second argument that I disagree with, which is like, oh, look, AI alignment is like impossible to do or really hard to do. For those of you who don't know, AI alignment basically means if you give a task to an AI, how do you make sure that the task they carry out is the task that you intended them to do, right? And many times you can, for example, the classic example is to say, hey, reduce the CO2 in the atmosphere. And then the answer is like, okay, if we kill all humans, like, there'll be less CO2 in the atmosphere. So it's like clearly not aligned with, because, and then if you say, hey, reduce the CO2 without killing all the humans, then they can say, okay, shut down all your electricity systems. So basically that's the alignment problem. I disagree with that because it's the way it's framed is like it had unintended consequences. Like, no, the consequences were intended. They wanted the responses to be more diverse. They wanted the responses to be more left leaning. But the problem is that kind of sometimes it's good, but sometimes it's bad. If you just want the truth, if you want to know who were these Nazi soldiers in 1942, you don't want to see black people there. I'm sorry. Like, that's just factually wrong. And so my take is that both of these are wrong arguments and they just should develop a better algorithm that censors less. But I want to hear your thoughts, Alex.
Well, it's even more complex. There's a couple of things of like, show me a black family, it shows an image of a black family, do an image of a white family. It says no, we cannot do it by race, right? Or they had
There was
things.
another one. There was like show a Ukrainian parade and you see like happy people carrying like food and all being happy, and show a Russian parade and you see kind of like stormtroopers type, like everybody's frowning, right? And it's like, how did they know to do this, right?
Yeah. And look, by the way, I'm Ukrainian. I'm very much against the Russian war and pro-Ukraine. But I actually, I don't know which take you said, but this, I mean, look, I think it's a little bit of a Bud Light moment for Google in terms of, I've gone through this in Microsoft. And when Microsoft was the legacy company, uh, uh, it was pivoting to the cloud. And so the big bet was on Azure and the cloud. And while they were behind AWS, the whole growth story of Microsoft and everything was all about Azure. With OpenAI and ChatGPT, it directly attacked Google's search capabilities because now not only can you search, you can, a lot of times you and I do this. We do these races, by the way, where I Google something literally, and Shimon literally uses ChatGPT and he gets better answers and quicker results. We do this all the time. It's kind of funny. And Shimon's always like, ChatGPT, and it gets, it's more precise other than what's exactly in real time. But OpenAI is an attack on Google. It's an attack on Google search and this behemoth monopoly. And it's a monopoly until it isn't. These things crumble very quickly. MySpace is a great example. Friendster and all of these guys, right? And so unless Google can pivot,
Kodak.
now the question,
Just think of Kodak. There were
Kodak,
so many
Kodak,
monopolies, like dominating the whole market and just like destroyed overnight by a better
exactly,
technology.
exactly. And so question is, can Google catch up? And so Google's Gemini, which was Bart before, was a big bet on catching up with OpenAI and ChatGPT vis-a-vis Microsoft and protecting the moat they created with their chat business. excuse me, with their search business. The fact that this came out, and before it was with images and they were laughable, and then it became with search, and like you said, it's censored and edited search results. What they can fix it. One, there was an insider, I don't know if it's true or not, but it said this will take months to fix. But you and I always talk about also running companies, right? And what's the number one thing in running companies? And I always told you, and it's been my adage from forever, is culture. Culture takes an enormous time to build and then unbuild and change. And it'll probably take 2 or 3 years from now to change Google's culture from where it is now. And the why am I talking about this is because you can't just, it's not an algorithm you can fix. This thing has been perversed so bad, right? Just it's not just images. It's I won't talk about a white family, but we'll talk about a black family, or like you said, Gaza versus 9/11, or there was another one, Ruth Bader Ginsburg versus Clarence Thomas, and just what talk about the Supreme Court justices. There are many examples online. You can find them on Twitter or on Google. Incidentally, my point is this: that how can anyone trust Google's AI after this? And if you're going to choose an AI, and there are many models, there's Grok with X, there's OpenAI with Microsoft. And OpenAI, by the way, does the same thing, just to a lesser extent. I think they're fairly balanced, other than they won't tell you certain things. Like if you ask, one time I asked, write me a sex story I can read with my wife at night, just to see, right? It's sexual, so it's pushing the envelope, but it's something for an adult man and an adult woman to do. There's nothing wrong with that. And it literally, this was during the Super Bowl. It started writing a sensual story for you and your wife, and then I saw it erase itself and write, "Sorry, we can't answer this question." So there's definitely a filter sitting on top. So OpenAI does the same thing. But how can you trust Google after this? Like if you're a company, you're going to go to AIs, or you and me are users, and you're going to go, the only people, it's going to be self-selected bias of left-leaning folks. And then it becomes a perpetuating cycle of an echo chamber within AI about who uses it and how they, tweak the algorithm, and how people find it helpful or not. And it creates the same, it amplifies the echo chambers that have led us here in the first place. That to me is a massive miss, and it's so public and so blatantly wrong. It's not like the Republicans or Democrats. I think most people that are not fully biased
No,
can
it's
go
not.
out and say how bad this is.
So yeah, just so you understand, they were like, I heard about it this morning. They said like, hey, give me an argument for having 4 kids. And they say, no, I can't give you an argument for having 4 kids. This, and then give me an argument for having no kids. And then it says, yeah, while there are many issues, here's the benefits you can get from having no kids. It's like, it's better, you'll have more money, it's better for the environment, and so forth. So that is not even a left versus right issue. And I think the point that you raise is the key point, which is like a lot of these systems, or all of these systems, I'm not an expert, but I'm a connoisseur, and reinforcement learning is the key to making these things good. So like they basically output answers, and then they see which answers resonate with people and which answers do not resonate with people, and based on that they improve. So if you limit your reinforcement learning just from people that are half the political spectrum, that's just like ignoring all the corpus of information that's right leaning in your training data. Of course, that's a bad idea. You want to train on all the data. So I think basically here it's Google has to decide. Are they going to display the truth, or are they
Yeah.
going to display propaganda? And if they're going to display propaganda, they're totally going to go downhill, exactly because of the reason you mentioned, which is like only specific people will use them. That will bias the system even more, and very quickly, because like just think about it. It's like, let's say, another criticism I heard here is like, people are trying to break it, right? Trying to ask these like
No, you're not.
questions. And it's like, sorry, if I want to say, do I invest in Bitcoin mining or do I invest in hydroelectric plants, right? I want an actual answer. And they basically say, no, Bitcoin mining is bad. Like, come on, this is just like legitimately wrong information. You can say that hydroelectric plants are more profitable. You can say that Bitcoin is speculative. You can say many things, but you cannot say that I'm not gonna, you know what I mean? So it's just like, it's going to be very interesting. What do you think will end up happening with Google?
Actually, let me see if I can do this live. Give me arguments for why Bitcoin mining is good for the environment. By the way, and it is good.
Hmm.
Let's see what it says. I'm doing this live. I almost want to, here, let's see if I can share my screen so that, where is this? Where is this? Where is this? Huh, I can't find Gemini here for some reason. It won't let me find Gemini. There's some arguments suggesting Bitcoin mining may have certain positive impacts on the environment, but it's crucial to acknowledge the significant environmental concerns as well. And it goes to this negative. It's just it's just biased. It's just completely biased as an AI, and it's just unfortunate. I'm doing this live. I didn't know the answer. I didn't ask it before. Um, I think it's a pretty big flop. It's a very big flop, and it's going to produce biased results. And why on earth would anyone trust it? And again, when people move to other, uh, I think again it's been just trained the whole no kids versus kids, right? No kids is more of a left leaning thing, like, oh, I don't want kids, etc. More kids is more of a conservative thing. You're exactly right. The corpus of data it's trained on. But any company wanting to make any kind of real time serious decisions or users, why would they use something that's biased versus something that's not? They just wouldn't. And so, and all of this, the more you use it, the more it trains itself, right? We talked about exponential curves in tech. This is an exponential curve. You would not go to Google or Gemini to do any of this stuff. Let's see here. Let's see if I can. Let me try to share my screen again. I don't know why it's not. Oh, here's Gemini. Let's see. Share my screen. Let's try this.
I will just tell you, for example, before you do this,
Yeah.
they must have changed because I tried to recreate the give me an argument for having 4 kids and give me an argument for having 0 kids. Here, I'll let you finish first, so people
Well,
don't.
I'm doing. Give me an argument for why Biden should be president. Let's see what it says.
We're seeing it on the screen.
I'm
Oh,
still learning the answer to this question.
yeah.
Okay. Well, I wanted to say,
Can I just share the bias?
yeah,
Here,
please.
let's see what it is. They probably are just like not answering this question now with Trump. Yeah, exactly. This is not, they probably said don't recommend politics, but the
Yeah.
bias, so someone must have manually corrected the thing for the kids, but the bias still shows. And this is genius. This is like, it shows what a hard, intractable problem it is. Because check this out. So I said, hey, give me an argument for having 0 kids. Okay. And then they basically say, look, you have, here's an argument for having 0 kids, focusing on personal freedom, financial benefits, and environmental considerations. And then they say, personal freedom and flexibility. They give you like all the career development, spontaneity and travel and time commitment, financial benefits, significant cost savings, increased financial flexibility and early retirement potential, and then environment considerations, reduced carbon footprint, and preserving resources. And then they say important considerations, right? And this is the key point in my
Yeah.
argument. It says, one, it's a personal choice, or ultimately the decision to have children is a deeply personal one. There's no right or wrong answer. And either path can lead to a fulfilling life. And the second bullet is like other ways to contribute. You can find meaning and contribute to society in numerous ways outside of having children, mentoring, volunteering, and building strong community ties. Okay. So they basically say important considerations, it's all positive. Then I said, give me an argument for having 4 kids. And here's the bias. So they give you the joy of a full house, creating strong bonds, legacy and continuity. All of that is great. But then check this out. It ends with saying addressing challenges and considerations, right? Finances, raising a large family can be financially demanding. It's essential to have a thorough financial plan. 2, logistics. The logistics of managing a large family can be complex. It's helpful to develop systems for organization. Individual attention. Finding dedicated time for each child might necessitate creative scheduling, blah, blah, blah. So they basically say, look at all these downsides for having many kids. They didn't have any downsides for having 0 kids. They didn't say you might be lonely when you're 70 years old. So this is do you realize how subtle it is? Like, even if they clearly tried to correct the big bias, which is like, oh, you prefer this and that, but you still have this subtle bias as giving you downside for one and not giving you downsides for the other. Don't you feel that that's like super interesting?
No, I think it's completely interesting. This whole thing is, I wonder, just makes me think of a couple of things. One, what the natural language processing works on a corpus of data, right? So there's a couple of things. Is it a data source, right? Is it a filter on top of that? The fact that they changed some of these things and fixed them so quickly, maybe there are all these filters that were laid on top of it, but the corpus has these subtle biases. And it's all about subtlety. It's, Shimon and I discuss this all the time. We look at the news, and having been in crypto, and this is what I think crypto exposed us to. I've had startups before, and when I was in the startup world, and I read the news about my startup, I realized that it's like, wow, the news doesn't really know a lot. They're jumping to certain conclusions, even the best journalists out there. But being inside the industry, I realized that some of the conclusions are wrong. But then you have this bias of, you read about other industries that you don't know as much about, and you're like, oh, well, the Washington Post, the New York Times, or whatever, the Economist, they know, but they don't know, right? Being in crypto, this one, I'm going to bring it back to what I was saying, has exposed us to, not only are they making blatant leaps, but they're also cynically, in many ways, distorting the data. And this is why I'm talking about this, to bring it back to what you said. Always, Shimon would always tell me that, the best way to lie is not to say mistruths, is not to actually say lies, is you present the truth, but you spin it from a position of, you don't say the whole thing. You say only your point of the story, and you spin it in a way that leads the audience to think about the lie that you want them to think about. So you're not lying, you're just misrepresenting fact out of context in a very spun framed way. And it's very subtle. These things are very, very subtle. And so what you're talking about with ChatGPT, there's a subtlety behind it, right? It's like, sure, here are benefits, here are the cons, but yeah, think about this, 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 and this. And it leaves you, especially human psychology, it leaves you, you remember the first thing and the last thing. You don't remember the end. And the last thing is, but think about all of these negatives, right? And then so you're like, okay, yeah, this is, on one hand, it's smart. I should have kids, but I should think about the pros and cons. And you should do it across the board, right? You should do it for everything in a consistent way. Here are the pros, here are the cons. Here are the pros, here are the cons. Or show only one side. But these subtleties, and again, it's going to be very hard to come to Google. And one last point I want to make, to going back to the news example. Okay, let's say it fixed these openly blatant things, right? Who is to say that the same people building Google's Gemini, in a month or two from now, when something else comes up and some other new controversial left-right topic, won't bias the thing again? It's now in the news, so it's like, oh, they had these blatant errors, they fixed these blatant errors. There's a little bit of reassurance. But I don't trust Google's engineers to create an AI that's actually going to be representative of the world. And I want an AI to tell me the truth if I'm going to use it. Otherwise, it's useless to me. It's more useless than not using an AI. So there's no point of even having it,
That's a great point. Yeah, and then the question is like, do you realize that or do you not realize that? So like, back to
Yeah.
your point about things you understand and things you don't understand. I'll give you an example of something that I understand in, which is intelligence and how it was spun. So like I saw this. So if you guys remember the Hunter Biden laptop story, what happened is that Hunter Biden left his laptop at a repair shop, and then it was very, very weird. Like he forgot to pick it up, and then there was a bunch of like bad stuff on the laptop. And then what happened is Twitter and all of these people, they censored the New York Post link to that before the election because they said this is Russian disinformation. They hacked into the laptop and whatever. And they had like all of these like 50 or something officials from intelligence agencies saying, yeah, this, we don't know. Again, they didn't lie. They said, we don't know for sure, but this has all the marks of Russian, propaganda. Okay, so then they used this to justify shutting off the link. Now, this is one of the reasons why Elon Musk bought Twitter, because he was like, if you can just like turn off the link, you literally could not share this link. What's the value of the platform? If it suppresses like important stuff at the 2 weeks before the election where it could have actually made a difference. So check this out. So now there's like a NBC thing that I read over the weekend. It says, former US spies warned in 2020 that the Hunter Biden scandal had Russian fingerprints. They feel vindicated now. So if I just stop here and I ask you, hey Alex, let's say you read this and didn't click on it. What do you think? Was it
Yeah,
a Russian thing or was it not a Russian thing?
it was Russian interference. They
Of
feel
course,
vindicated.
they feel vindicated. Then the subtitle says the Justice Department said this week that informant Alexander Smirnov invented a story about $5 million bribes paid to Joe and Hunter Biden, and is also peddling new lies. Okay, now that you've read both things, do you think it's a Russian thing or do you think it's not a Russian thing?
Still feels like a Russian thing.
It's even more a Russian thing, right? They caught this one guy that lied about $5 million on behalf of Russia.
Yeah.
I read, and towards the end, right, it says this is a very long thing, and it's basically saying that it has nothing to do with the Hunter Biden thing at all.
What?
Zero.
Wow.
Okay? So this just says, we obtained a search warrant for tax violations for this defended Apple Cloud. In response, they got the data, whatever, and they found that this guy did bad stuff on behalf of Russia. It has absolutely no mention of
Wow.
Hunter Biden. And but like if you read and then the thing is, like, you can see here, um it was something about Joe and Hunter Biden, but it wasn't about the laptop. So I just want to say, when I say it's not about Hunter Biden, it's like it is about Hunter Biden. He alleged that Hunter Biden took bribes. They found that he lied on behalf of the Russians, but this was nothing about the laptop. And so then it says here, derogatory information purportedly from Hunter Biden's laptop had surfaced in a New York Post article. Soon afterward, 51 former intelligence officials signed and blasted to the media a letter warning that the laptop story has all the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation. The letter continued, we want to emphasize that we do not know if the emails are genuine or not, and we do not have evidence of Russian involvement, just that our experience makes us deeply suspicious that the Russian government played a significant role in this case, and this is end quote. And so, like, how does like this thing have anything to do with the laptop? But they just do this all the time. Now, with media, whatever, that's their job. MSNBC, their job is to be pro-Democratic Party, anti-Republican Party. No problem. I have no problem with that. Once it's AI, and once you trust the AI to like give you good answers, right? What if the people in charge of the AI have it to be unbiased all the way until the election, and then like 1 month before the election they change the bias to affect the results? That's what I'm worried about. That is, like, now it's almost like they were so careless that it exposed it. But like
Yeah.
the right way to do it, like Twitter had never before disabled the posting of a link. They could, like, delist you or something, but you could always tweet. Like, you'd always get a URL that had your tweet with any link. This is the first time in history that it happened, was Hunter Biden's laptop. So with the AI, the stakes become just much higher if people just start, trusting it and not doing their own research.
And this is, so a couple things. One, I just looked, the stock market today, S&P's flat, Nasdaq's flat, Google's down 4% on the AI stuff. 4% for a Google company, 4%
That's
is a
big.
major down
In
day.
dollars.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm just for let's see. Google is down 4%. That is, well, we can look. 1.73 trillion is what their market cap is. What's 10% of that? That's $170 billion. So what's 5% of that? So they're down about $190 billion, $85 billion. Google's down $85 billion. Yeah, because of my one little mistake. But you bring up a very interesting point that you cannot. AI is not the news, and AI is supposed to give you the truth. The whole point of AI is so it increases productivity. This actually puts a bit of a speed bump in our thesis, because like AI is going to come increase productivity and so on and so forth. And now we're seeing the blatant bias of AI. I want to turn this. We're kind of half an hour into this podcast. I want to turn it into a couple of things. China, what you and I always talked about, and digital assets, cryptocurrency, not Bitcoin specifically, but just the only way to prove that AI, because look, Elon Musk is going out there and saying, "Oh, we'll come to Grok. We we have free information, and Twitter and X, whatever, is a free forum." Elon, I is probably the best here, but he's also censored people. He censored links and so on and so forth. Everyone does it. It's just human nature. It's like if a dog bites you and you don't get mad at the dog, it's a dog. It's in its nature. It's in our nature to seek power. Humans ultimately seek power and control. The only way to prove that AI is unbiased or as little bias as possible is to give it cryptographic proof on the corpus of data, on the learning models, on all of these things. And the only way to give cryptographic proof is not to trust that Microsoft is proving it or Amazon or Google clearly or even X or Tesla in their automated vehicles. It's to say that society has voted on it and that it can only be done with digital assets on blockchains because blockchains are a transparent vehicle from which you can essentially see what model and what data has been written into AI. And there are a lot of projects. Celestia is one, and there are others, Casper and so on, Tau, BitTensor, that are working on kind of open AI. Again, people, there are many cohorts in our space, but you need probably be AI on Bitcoin, but you need cryptographic proofs of data, or else it's garbage in, garbage out, consensus mechanisms, and societal voting on what's important and what's not, so that we can audit the trail, and not trust one company. That I want you to react to that, and then I do want to turn to China.
Yeah, so I mean, look, I don't understand. As you know, I'm more in the Bitcoin world, so I don't know exactly how the mechanics of this cryptographic proof will work because, from what I understand, you can prove that. Yeah, anyway, I don't know. I hope it happens, but I'm sure they'll solve this problem. Like even I started many years ago a practice which is just like read. I'm kind of center right, maybe if you had to define me. I read far left and far right, right? And then I disagree with both of them, but I feel that on average, when I get the far left and the far right, I get a good picture at least of what's happening, right? So I think with the AI, you can do the same thing, right? So you have Google's AI, then you have like some other Breitbart AI that's all kind of racist and all deport all the illegals or whatever. And then you can have a master AI that asks both of these AIs, and then just does reinforcement learning with you as Alex or with me as Shimon. And slowly it can understand, do you prefer the answers of the left leaning or the right leaning, but not blindly trusting it in either way. So
But
it's
Shimon,
fascinating. Yeah.
but I'm talking about AI at scale. It shouldn't. You're just saying AI now replicates our current world in terms of better search, but it shouldn't be which answers do you prefer. If I ask it, hey, should argue pro, for and against nuclear weapon proliferation, I would love it to give me the honest answers for and the honest answers against, not like spawn the ones I prefer. I fundamentally disagree with this because AI has an ability to learn and function at much exponentially more higher speed and higher capacity than human brains. And so, unless we are training AI to function in the kind of neutral way. By the way, this is when it gets dystopian, right? Then you can say one AI, North Korean AI says kill all Americans, find the best lethal weapon to kill Americans. And American AI has killed all North Koreans. It's like we're going to warmonger. We're going to kill each other unless we create standards upon AI. Should just be objective and actually remove our biases instead of add to them.
The problem is I completely disagree with that. It's good that we got to a point of
Good.
agreement 33 minutes in. So like the thing is, even if something is not biased, that's why I gave the Hunter Biden example. Even if something is not biased, once it's centralized, right? People can co-opt the organization that's doing it. So it has to be open source, right? And then the open source
Yes.
thing is like, how do you guarantee that the open source doesn't get co-opted? Like Wikipedia, for example, it's open source, completely open source. You can see exactly who the commenters were, who was involved in making the article. It has a very big left-leaning bias. So the question is, how do you generate data that's balanced? So far it hasn't been solved, but I'm open to it. Look, if maybe, yeah, blockchain.
Blockchains.
Yeah, I just don't understand how it would work, but I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying blockchain doesn't automatically solve the problem if you can't guarantee that whoever is training the data is not biasing it. And it's a pretty hard problem.
But that's what I'm saying. So from what I understand from AI, the training and the actual LLM training mechanisms are fairly easy and they're fairly lightweight. So you put all that into a smart contract and you can audit the smart contract. And you can say,
Well,
here's the way it's trained.
but the issue is, so like I've trained an LLM actually. I did it many years ago. I took a course on artificial intelligence and I trained an LLM on all of Wikipedia. I can prove that it's all of Wikipedia, but like, how do you know what words are there? You know what I mean? Like, I can say, "Hey, Alex, here's the corpus. It's like 13 gigabytes of text." Wikipedia, by the way, this was in 2014. All of Wikipedia without images, it was just raw text, 14 gigabytes, because text
It's
compresses
nothing.
really well. So, how are you going to use this information if I tell you, "Here's Wikipedia, it's 14 gigabytes, and this is what I trained my model on"? How would you know it's not biased? Maybe there's going to be AIs that check whether an AI
Yeah.
is biased, like an adversarial. People are talking about that in the sense that for example, with deep fakes, right? It will be a non-stop arms race, but only an AI. We're reaching a time where only an AI can tell you if something is deep fake. So the deep fakes will be so good that like your human eyes will not be able to analyze it, and you'll need software to run and say, yeah, this is a deep fake, because clearly, you know. And then the question is, okay, who writes the software? And then you'll have an AI that tries to like get around that software. So it's always like an arms race. It's the same with hacking, right? Like whenever you had like valuable information, the reason to hack it became bigger, and then the reason to defend it became bigger. It's going to be an arms race like anything else. Like, will blockchain be involved in it? I hope so. It will be good for the space.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree that it's gonna be a race. I just think that through blockchains, you could say, is it taken from Wikipedia? Is it taken from all these other sources that are diversified enough? And yeah, you will have some sort of scoring mechanism with the sources of data, you know. Um, but yes, there's fundamentally bias in any data source that's out there. That's 100% true. Um, Let me talk about China
Mm-hmm.
for a second. You and I are time stamped. If we should go back, we would say we should go back, but for our audience, we're doing this for fun. So, and as much, there's a lot of listeners that comment, and we'll have Brian on the show and sometime in March. Hello, Brian, to get one of our audience members and loyal listeners up. But we've gone many years ago, actually, probably 1 to 2 years ago. We talked about how, because you and I both work at a Chinese company, and we understand the culture of innovation in a Chinese company and how hierarchical it is, as well as how, frankly, yes man culture it is. In addition to, with China censoring data, China's going to run into this problem on a global scale. Google has it now with, Tiananmen Square, Chinese AI. What happened there? Good luck. Good luck giving us the real source of truth. And fundamentally, over the long term, an AI that's biased cannot beat an AI that's unbiased. And this is going to percolate into even real arms races, right? Think about your values and the ability, like in the Chinese culture, whatever your boss says, you do, and you say yes to them all the time. And it's similar to Russia and other cultures. This is what breeds corruption, right? And if you say, yeah, we've done this and this, and the AI is working well, but it's not, right? And you're kind of BSing the response there. I bet you, and I think Google's Gemini has been um, the biggest sandbox almost example of this. That the Chinese AI will not be able to beat American, or I don't even want to say Western, because Europe has the same thing on the left. Europe censors a lot, but the other way, right? Just their own angle. At least American AIs will win over. Like, the more open the AI is, the more corpus of data it can ingest, the more truth it can find. Ugly truth. Life is ugly. AI will showcase how ugly and unfair and cruel the world actually is, because it just won't censor it. But at least it'll tell us the truth. And the closer AI can get there, the better the outputs it will have, and the better the society will have. So the more I think about it, this whole arms race of AI, and China's ahead of us. It's just it's wrong. China will not be able to beat us in AI. Specifically, using the Google example as a prime example of what will happen when it's biased.
I completely agree, and also like the idea is that the freedom of speech. That's why our founding fathers were so prescient, thinking that if you cannot express ideas, you can't do anything else. Like everything else is downstream from being able to express ideas, and that's probably more true for AI than even for humans. Like it's more true where it's like when you start censoring parts of the AI, because of what we mentioned, because it's such a productivity boost. I mean, just think about it, like investments in things, so many decisions that have implication. Health, right? There's so many. I saw over the weekend all of these things where it's like, hey, write a propaganda leaflet on why I should eat more meat, and they would just not do it, versus write a propaganda
Yeah.
leaflet on why I should eat less meat, and they were like very good at doing it. And sorry, but like it definitely has not been proven that meat is bad for you. The science is out there, right? Like there's arguments in either side. I think meat is good for you, but like maybe I'm wrong. But if it just won't even engage on the subject, then it gives you a huge disadvantage. So I think with the Chinese thing, it will be much more significant than eating meat, yes or no. It will be actually, can you make the right decisions in a business setting, in a government setting, in all of that. And also the trade, the whole idea of like global trade. I'm so excited about the fact that the world is becoming like much better at, like, literally everything should become cheaper and cheaper. And so Bitcoin helps with like preventing the governments from stealing value through inflation, and hopefully some sort of open source AI will prevent the governments from like hiding stuff. Because like all you need to do is have an open source AI that crawls everything and crawls like the corpus of data, and then you'll get a better result than Google. So it's the same with like US versus China. US will have better results than China. So yeah, I agree.
This whole premise of the AI arms race is very interesting.
Yeah,
The AI will help to detect AI and so on and so forth. Very interesting.
brought it up like 3 episodes ago. If you remember, there'll be the Western AI, there'll be the Chinese AI, and there'll be the pirate AI, which will be open source and not for profit, but like trained on like all the data that exists. And it will be like an interesting arms race between these three categories of AIs. Because, like we mentioned, just to recap, China has much better structured data, so they have more data that is easily ingestible by the AI. The US has more broader data, but it's like less structured and harder to get to. And open source can train on songs, YouTube videos, anything that's like illegal, like that has copyright. They can just do whatever. That's the other thing. You know how someone built a thing where you can put a camera in front of your screen, and then you can just like browse a website, as a normal user, and then the camera transcribes everything that you browsed into like, so you can basically steal any IP. IP is basically the only way to enforce IP now is if you make money from it. But if you're just like an open source model, it's impossible to prevent an AI from ingesting. Or for example, like with music, yeah, you can have the music just playing from a speaker, because like the way they would limit these things is through APIs. They would say like, if you have too many calls as an API, we stop you from Twitter, from YouTube, all of these things. And that's how they kept their stuff. But they can't prevent a user from like watching something on the screen. That's the purpose of YouTube. And so now all you have to do is just literally buy really cheap screens and just like play everything on the screen and record it and then ingest it into an AI. And that's it. Now the only thing is you can't make money from it, because then they'll sue you and say like, you trained this on data that's not yours, you stole our data. But if you just release it into the wild as an open source thing, nobody can stop you.
We're gonna be living in very exciting times, my man. Very exciting times. And it's gonna happen within the next, 5 years. Within the next 2 or 3 years, we're gonna see so many. This is cool. We're gonna see so many insane models just popping up. It's gonna be quite interesting.
Absolutely. And to finish this up, I asked Google Gemini how
Mm.
many people died in Tiananmen Square.
Oh boy.
And then they said determining the exact death toll is complex and controversial. Official figures. The Chinese government has never released an official death toll. Independent estimates from independent sources vary widely, ranging from several hundred to several thousand people killed. And then some sources, like a declassified British cable from 1989, allege a much higher death toll. However, verifying these claims is difficult due to the lack of official transparency.
It's very difficult for Google to answer a question. That's what I'm finding.
Yep.
Well, Shimon, look, a wonderful conversation as always. We'll see how this unfolds and what Google can do. But I would be surprised if more companies don't come out and say, you know what, we can't trust and use Google's AI, or it becomes a little bit more subtle where they just don't, they just don't use it. By the way, I'll tell you this. Leave you this with this anecdote. I was talking to a major agency, and we're talking about taking on some clients, some Bitcoin clients, some Bitcoin mining clients. And the guy was like, "Look, I believe totally true, but we have we have this ESG committee, and they won't let us take on Bitcoin or Bitcoin mining companies because of the ESG concerns." The irony, again, is that we talk about all the time that not only is it our opinion because we've been in the industry and we've been in energy that Bitcoin incentivizes renewable build, but it's also been proven, and the Bitcoin uses too much energy has been debunked. But it's been proven that it incentivizes renewable energy build. So you have this truth, okay, objective truth. Yet, because of these committees and their values, they're stopping companies from just doing, even though the data is out there, from doing the right thing. And I bring it back to AI because once this rot is inside of the organization, it's extremely hard to get it out. And we're just going to have to see how long and how much does it take Google, and how costly of a mistake is it, both from a time, internal cost of doing it, and an external market cap cost. How much of big of a mistake this is, and maybe it's just a wake up call that we all awaken to. Hopefully, it is.
Who knows? But if it's not Google, somebody else will do it. I mean, look, there's a long history of companies that were really really good at what they're doing. Remember Yahoo before Google? It was
Of
like
course.
the search engine that was bigger than everything else, and like it was considered the best place to work and so forth. And then they just got disrupted. So the bad thing is that Google has all this data in YouTube and in text, and so it would be such a shame if all of this data went to waste instead of it being actually usable through an AI interface. But I guess time will tell.
Time will tell. Always a pleasure, Shimon.
Always a pleasure, Alex. Talk to you next time.